Hello, welcome to the next talk in my series, all about becoming a conscious soul in a body on the planet through the chart. As EA says, a fully individuated soul. And that is why I'm calling this the Birthing Consciousness series. Today we're looking at Venus. I'm going to see how long I can get away with doing this outside because it's lovely, but I'm not sure what the sun is going to get up to. So let's see. Getting right into it. And here we go. Making the most of Venus in the natal chart, Birthing Consciousness series with me, Prism Dawn. So a quick note, throughout much of this talk, I'm going to refer to the archetypal concepts presented, represented through both planets and their corresponding signs. So I will be using the names of planets and their corresponding signs interchangeably. You will hear me say, for example, Venus, Taurus, Libra, and you know that I'm talking about all the same thing when I'm using those interchangeably. So just a quick refresher on the Birthing Consciousness series concept. So as outlined in the principle of evolutionary astrology, the journey of the soul is a journey of individuated consciousness. So we come from the cosmic soup of all things, yum, unity consciousness. At the end of our cycle, we return to this soup. And in between the journey we take to exhaust desires, learn lessons, evolve, and master the fullest expression of our essence through a fully individuated consciousness feeds the whole, offering variety and experience that we bring home with us as we return to the cosmic soup. And the act of this realization of self is what I refer to as birthing consciousness, as it's through the maturation process that we fully become conscious. So from the moment our souls make contact with this planet, we encounter collective karmas latent on the planet that we interact with and take on as our own in order to work out for the collective. And we create new karmas that must be worked out, all of which are felt as obstacles in our expression of self and block the fullest expression of our essence through individuated consciousness. So that is, when you're not experiencing the full lot of a planet, then something is being blocked. And that something is, by and large, karma, which evolutionary astrology gets to the business of sorting out for us, and so that we can become fully individuated and we can express our fullest essence in a body instead of taking on the flavors of those karmas. So through the astrology chart and through the paradigm of EA specifically, we can see where a soul is in this process of becoming fully conscious. Each planet and sign has a part to play in the collection of archetypal energies that together make up the sum total of being. Today, we focus on Venus and correspondingly Libra and Taurus. First, a note on the progression of consciousness being actualized through the chart. So the chart is broken up into quadrants, each representing a new frontier of development. The coming from the point of unity, which is all things, that would be Pisces, coming from Pisces and then returning to. So coming from that first into that first quadrant covers the basic task of becoming a person in a body, the most basic first act of individuation. The second quadrant furthers this individuation through the realization of personal essence within an environment. The third quadrant creates the conditions for the soul to further individuate through the awareness of, quote, other, and to have a context to better understand what it, on an individual level, stands for and believes in. And finally, the fourth quadrant represents the full maturation process through an integration of self within a society, culminating in an integration of self back into the cosmic soup, or reabsorbed into unity consciousness. Now on to Venus. In Taurus, Venus is yin, it's fixed, and it's earth element. And it's the The archetype embodies nature, fertility, beauty, patience, sustenance. To preserve, it represents the body, the senses, feeling, natural resources. So that's funny. It looks like it says feeling natural. There's supposed to be a dash there, feeling and natural resources. But I suppose feeling natural too is perfectly Tauran. So in Libra, Yang, it's cardinal and it's air. So it's social, embodies like social, relationships, inclusivity, relativity, listening, harmony, beauty, pleasing, accommodating, partnership, diplomacy, and intimacy. So Venus and glyph, and I gotta say, so I do like to spend time on the glyph at the beginning of each of my talks, and the time that I spent on this glyph, I feel like essentially just provided pretty much everything that needed to be said. Like when you really break it down, the glyph helps to really understand it on just a most fundamental and simplest level that is really worth taking some time on. So I did do that. So spirit, if you break the glyph into its parts, the circle at the top is spirit. It's the spirit is all things. So there's no beginning or end. It's the circumference is everywhere and the beginning is nowhere. It is all things indeed. And spirit in the glyph is arising, is above matter. The cross equals matter. So it's the intersection of time and space and creating physical form. So spirit, the circle in the glyph, again, it's all things. So the idea of a spirit as yours, mine, or singularly possessed is actually a misnomer. Spirit is all things simultaneously. So spirit is a blanket in the blanket theory, if you're familiar with that. According to the impulse which drives creation, matter, quote, arises from spirit. So the impulse tells spirit what form, as in matter, to take. In Venus, in the Venus glyph, spirit is above matter, maintaining its level of prominence and importance. And it is through this connection to spirit that the material strives to be elevated through art, diplomacy, kindness, and beauty. So, returning to the glyph, spirit is above matter, but the manifestation into matter, into me and you, creates the cross in the glyph. So, as one, the cross represents matter within time and space, and two, it is the intersection of or the relationship between two things. So, while spirit is all things, spirit feels different or expresses differently on me or you, or within certain lands or environments. Still, it is one spirit, just expressed or received according to the essence and individuated consciousness of one manifestation or another. Or the karmas, for example. That's another way that we might resonate spirit a little bit more uniquely based on what we're carrying. So if we're carrying a lot of karmas, that's going to do a lot to inform the world that we are in, the way that we embody and inhabit spirit is going to mold itself to that on us. But when we're able to get more clear and more aligned with our essence and hold less of our karmic imprint or fewer karmic imprints, then the more spirit will be aligned with who we truly are. So the expressing and receiving of energy between things means that a relationship occurs. So the expressing and receiving of energy or consciousness between me and you is Venus in Libra, which is the connected to air. So the expressing and receiving of energy within an environment is Venus in Taurus, connected to Earth. For example, we exchange energy with our environment when we eat food from it or decompose or defecate into it. That is an exchange of energy. Simply put, Venus is relationship. So Venus is the relationship between things, which is why it at its core represents the themes of harmony and balance. And this is why Venus represents beauty. because it is through the parts of a thing being in harmony with each other that it becomes aesthetically pleasing. Harmony comes down to relating. So it's how we are relating to something, is how we are relating to it in harmony with it, and is it in harmony with us? It's why Venus represents diplomacy, and it's why Venus represents sustenance, as a thing out of harmony or out of balance cannot be sustained. So, on balance, through Taurus, you could ask, am I in balance with my environment? Is what I'm eating and generally consuming in balance with my need? And through Libra, are we in balance with one another? You and I, is what I'm asking from another in balance with my need? Is their capacity to respond to my needs in balance with theirs? So Venus in context. Let's see how I do over here. So next we'll look at Venus in both signs, in the context of the development of consciousness through the chart, and in the context of each of their association to Aries and Mars. In the beginning, there is Aries. Coming from unity, Pisces, a single pointed consciousness, Aries is an impulse to individuate, pushing forward to be made manifest into form. Note the glyph, the arrow shooting out from spirit. This is both on a level of individuated consciousness, as well as in the creation of material form according to the will of that consciousness, as a single-celled organism does not mutate and divide into more complex forms without an impulse to do so. Our environment is the contrast created by cells dividing under the pressure of this impulse. So the physical vehicle that our consciousness inhabits, our bodies, is created by cells dividing under the same pressure, creating matter, enter Taurus, and relationship, enter Libra. So while Mars in Aries is more of a single pointed, self oriented consciousness, Venus allows for the expansion of that consciousness through form and relationship. So looking at Venus in Taurus, in the first quadrant of the chart, and you can see in my image here, the Venus is representing our relationship to ourselves, that we may be conscious of our needs in order to recognize when we are out of balance or disharmony with ourselves. And it is our relationship to our environment, that we may eat in order to grow and sustain our bodies, and generally make choices that support being in harmony with our environments. It's also the relationship to the process of eating as a visceral, tactile experience, as experienced through the senses. Additionally, in Taurus, Venus is the environment itself, as the material world exists as a variety of cells in relationship to each other. So Taurus is an earth sign. It is relationship that exists on the densest of levels, matter itself, the most basic, simple fact of having a material body and sustaining it. So opposite Aries, you have Venus in Libra. So Venus in Libra is of the third quadrant. Venus in Libra balances the single pointed consciousness of Aries with an awareness of other, and with Venus being the relationship that is able to transpire between the two. Libra is an air sign, and of the elements, air facilitates the connectivity between things. It is our awareness of others and relationship to them that allows us to express ourselves in a way that can connect, and the ability to listen to another so that we connect to what they are saying. Without connection, there's no exchange and there's no relationship. And mind you, in Taurus, connection happens of a different matter. With Libra, it's that connection that happens through air. We literally breathe the air together. We share the air. There's an exchange that happens between us, this thing that's kind of unseen, but somehow is able to connect and be of both of us. With Taurus, it's more of a relationship to the environment that's much more like visceral. It's much more like I consume food, the food becomes me. It's a different kind of relationship. So in Taurus, beauty is harmony made manifest into something physical that can be appreciated, such as a sunset or a work of art. In Libra, we have the capacity to share in that beauty and a shared understanding and mutual appreciation. Also in Libra, harmony is beauty of a balanced relationship between self and other, where the individual consciousness of souls can be mutually shared and witnessed. As a yin sign, Venus in Taurus is yielding. The preceding yang energy of Aries, the impulse of consciousness to manifest into form, informs the yin energy of Taurus so that cells may divide and reorganize themselves harmoniously. As a yang sign, Libra has more agency of its own accord, and it is able to therefore match and balance the opposing energy of Aries, that self and other can be met as equals. The language I tend to use when speaking of these archetypes tends to honor them in their true light. So this is to talk about what it means to be in disharmony, which is in and of itself. So sorry, uh, the language that I use to speak about the archetypes in their true light, the true light in and of itself does not have negative associations. It is when this light is filtered or blocked through karmas that shadows are cast. And then you see some of the more, quote, negative associations being made to the archetypes, though it is only the absence of their light which allows this shadow expression to take form. By delving into the birth chart and understanding how we are experiencing the archetypes in our lives, we see where we are experiencing the shadow side of an archetype and the karmas involved. Um, which is exactly what evolutionary astrology is facilitating for us. So we can map our way back to the brightest expressions of these signs by understanding the karmas at play. When looking at challenges to signs, I also find it really helpful to remind myself of the context of these archetypes by their placement in the chart relative to other signs. So that is when looking at challenges to signs, I yeah, never mind. So if there is a challenge connected to the seventh house in the slash Libra archetype, for example, just remember that the sixth house is about teaching proper discernment. So understanding it relative to where it's coming from. The sixth house being about discernment means that you shouldn't forget to apply that to relationship with others and how you choose to share yourself or not to be discerning. Remember that the choices you make here pave the way for the eighth house slash Scorpio archetype. When you're going to be asked to, where you're going to be asked to, quote, get real with yourself about your motivations and desires that you're acting out. Seventh house Libra is balanced out by Aries in the and first house, so it helps to helps to balance you out so that you don't lose yourself in relationship, and make sure that you are able to be self-motivated and not become codependent, while Libra balances Aries' potential selfishness. So in the right balance of consideration for self and other, you achieve interdependence, which is a hallmark of a healthy relationship to self and other. And seventh house Libra is squared off by Capricorn, challenging you anywhere you're lacking accountability or integrity in relationships, and also Cancer, challenging where you're not acknowledging your roots or are not in right relationship with your emotions by either repressing them or being owned by your emotions. So if there's a challenging connection with Taurus in second house, remember that this energy is being informed by your own instinct and impulses as connected to the first house in Aries. Direct them well. And this energy paves the way for Gemini. So be mindful of what conclusion you make about the world based on your personal environment. And remember to keep an open mind. Taurus is opposite Scorpio. So it's balanced out by delving deeper than what you see on the surface. So again, don't allow yourself to get too stuck or rigid in the solidly materially focused earth sign. There is more around you than what you pick up on with your immediate senses, being Taurus. Yes, perceive your environment on a visceral level, on the most fundamental, basic of physical levels, but don't get stuck there. Let Scorpio balance that out so that you understand there's always deeper to go. So it's squared by Aquarius and Leo. So Taurus is challenged by Aquarius and Leo to be true to itself in matters of essence, creativity, and who you surround yourself with, rather than constricting yourself to just matters of survival. Remember that adaptability is a part of survival too. So don't be afraid to play, express yourself, and know that you can inform your environment to better support this and be mutually adaptive rather than just feeling like you are at the mercy of the elements. So next, we will go into a volunteer chart in order to address some of the challenges that come with this archetype when its energy is misaligned. When I was preparing for my talk, I put out a call for 2 volunteers and asked that they specifically need support in the areas of self-worth and connection. I was fortunate to have 2 beautiful, sensitive, and powerful souls come forward and volunteer their time and share intimately personal details about their lives. I'm grateful that they were able to share from a place of such depth and humility. We had a lot to talk about relative to their charts. I've just distilled as much as is supportive for this talk. Um, I put this in here because I wanted to remember to take the time to really honor what was shared here with my volunteers. It was this material is not easy to really go into um, from a very open place and in such a public way. So I bow to that. But I also um, ended up so one of my volunteers I am going to save for another talk because I want to say that both of their charts were so in depth and we spent so much time going pretty deeply into their charts, and it feels like there's just so much to really break down, and I didn't want to do a disservice to these charts by not giving them the proper time and space. And so, unfortunately, for the purpose of this talk, I did end up just picking one chart. Is a very complicated chart, and I think it's going to be um, a good chart for teaching because there's a whole lot wrapped up in this that is going to need to be broken down. And so I apologize to one of my volunteers. I want to give you the proper space on another day. So getting into this chart, um, we will look at this chart to address some of the challenges that can come with this archetype when its energy is misaligned. So I am calling this volunteer Lonnie. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. So, let's see. First off, just looking at the planets in her second and seventh houses, we have Jupiter retrograde in the seventh house, in the sign of Gemini. Lonnie expressed that she experiences self-doubt when others don't understand what she's saying, and she finds herself often repeating herself. And this Gemini, Jupiter in the seventh house, really does show her ability to have a non-linear way of synthesizing information from a higher vantage point, which is Jupiter, making it not always easy for others to connect to what is being expressed. So needing ways to slow down the process and make it more linear for others, or making peace with not being able to always convey the bigger picture to others, only sharing as much as others can assimilate. So the way that we were talking about it was as if to say um, there's this way of getting an overview where you look at all the pieces at once and you get a very vivid, colorful interpretation, or kind of you get the concept full on of what it is that you're trying to say. But when it comes time to break it down, what you're wanting to convey um, might be trying to explain to someone the color purple, and you've only been able to say as much as would convey red, and and they say I understand, but you have this nagging feeling like no, I think you're seeing red. I need to give you blue too, but not always knowing how to both address blue and red simultaneously in a way that makes sense. So as just kind of a colorful symbolic way of trying to explain that. So Lonnie says that she struggles with a lack of relationships in her life, and she doesn't understand why Jupiter in Gemini, seventh house, doesn't add up to more relationships. So, which is a very fair question that we are going to get into. So, you can see that this dynamic is impacted by the interceptions in her chart. And I will get into that in a minute. So, just to say that her interceptions play such a large role in her chart in kind of determining how she's experiencing relationships, that it doesn't really give that Jupiter the energy that she would think. So Jupiter is ruled by Saturn in Capricorn in the first house, making her communication style a prominent feature of her personality. And in Capricorn first, others might feel intimidated by her or read her as oppressive without her meaning to come across that way. So that's one thing that could help to uncover. And looking at Sun and Venus conjunct in the second house in Aquarius, moving to the planets in her second house, um, we can see that Aquarius is an intercepted sign. So, okay, now we really have to talk about what interceptions are. When a sign is not ruling a house, for those who aren't familiar with the concept of interceptions, um, the sign is what's called intercepted, again, when it's not ruling a house. So interceptions happen in pairs opposite each other on the chart. So when a sign is intercepted, it means that the energy or archetypal energy of that sign is not given rulership over a house. So that impacts its agency in the chart. So planets inside of intercepted signs are harder to access the energies of. The solution is to look at the planet that is ruling that sign for help. So if there's a planet intercepted in Leo, for example, you can work around it by focusing on whatever the sun is doing in the chart. Additionally, when two signs are not ruling any houses, it means that there are two other signs ruling double houses, giving them much greater prominence in the chart. And you can look at whatever planets are in those signs or being ruled by them to see where the energy in the chart is more strongly presenting. So, a couple of side notes on interceptions. There are charts that you can see this happening in, the interceptions, where it becomes clear that these energies don't actually feel, quote, locked away, as you would expect, but rather have been so developed from prior lifetimes that the energy of the chart is actually just being concentrated elsewhere. Um, but often, something that I've unfortunately encountered, well, not unfortunately, I know it's just not always an easy thing, but I often encounter charts with interceptions where it becomes clear that there is something very traumatic being worked through that the chart is providing indirect access to, because touching it directly would be too painful. So, and the reason why I corrected myself when I said unfortunately is because I if I see that a chart is doing this, that's a beautiful thing that the person is being given a chance to work through these things without having to take on too much of it directly, even though it can be confusing um, to be redirected in so many ways in the chart. So, and I'll explain what that looks like as we get into Lonnie's chart, because I do believe this to be true for Lonnie's chart. I believe this to be the case here. So Lonnie's chart is almost entirely tied up with the karmic axis in one way or another. has an incredible amount of retrograde energy, a lot of quote revisit and relive dynamic, and it's heavily emphasizes the MC IC axis, the midheaven, and the IC. So bringing things from deep within the roots and up into the light of an ancestral nature. So interceptions also can mean that you have to really put in your work, your own work, to develop in those areas. So while it can be harder, there's a certain type of reward that comes from it. Or you can just focus on where you're being redirected in the chart, because those are the energies that your chart is kind of funneling you toward. And when it comes time to work on the energies of those planets that are in intercepted signs and kind of locked away, again, not really given agency because they're not in a sign that has any rulership, then then you can look for when those planets are being aspected by transit. And you can also, in general, just pay more attention to those planets as they are kind of winding their way through the sky on a day-to-day basis. It might be that they hit certain points in your chart where their energy becomes more available as well. So on to Lonnie's interceptions. Signs of Leo and Aquarius are intercepted, and her intercepted planets in those signs, she has Venus and her Sun conjunct each other, both intercepted in Aquarius, aspecting and ruling her stellium on her midheaven, which includes Pluto, her north node, midheaven, and moon, all in Libra. And so this chart, that's why this chart is a really good example of how to make the most of Venus in the chart. Because if you're looking at Venus as in the Libra energy, this is an energy that is really, really locked away for Lonnie. And so finding some means of actually really liberating that for her in her chart is really is important work, getting that uncovered for her. And you also see Saturn retrograde, as many of her planets are, intercepted in Leo in the 8th house. And that's aspecting her retrograde Jupiter in the 7th in Gemini. And it's also aspecting her Chiron in the 5th house in Taurus. And as we're talking about that Venus energy, we will get into that 5th house Taurus, because that definitely is something that stands out as well. So some of the difficulties Lonnie has expressed that point back to her interceptions are, she said, quote, I feel stuck, frozen, afraid to be seen, to be judged or criticized, afraid of not being liked or made fun of. She said that she feels like she's sitting on the wings, hiding, alone, yet longing to be in community, in relationship, taking action and feeling free. So I point to her Sun and Venus interceptions in the 2nd house Aquarius. So that, again, that Sun Venus conjunct in Aquarius in 2nd house, and Aquarius being intercepted. So that Sun and Venus being very much locked up for her. So it touches on themes of Leo wounding that have to do with feelings of not being loved just for who you uniquely are, feelings of rejection, and in this sense that you're somehow supposed to perform for others in order to be loved. That there's some idea that others won't love you unless you get it just right. That you have to make yourself more amenable to them. So Lonnie also expressed, quote, never feeling like I am good enough or confident in who I am and what I am doing. Always this nagging self-doubt and like I'm doing it wrong somehow. And she's afraid she doesn't have, quote, inherent value, which again is that core wounding of the Leo archetype, which is pulled in heavily into the mix here with Venus and with the Libra archetype, very much blended together. So she also expressed having, quote, self-deprecating thoughts and behaviors. So this is all wrapped up in this interception, plus the addition of Saturn, also retrograde in the eighth house in Leo, um, also intercepted. Again, Leo being an intercepted sign. So Saturn, as this retrograde is turned inward, and turned inward as masochism, especially in the eighth house. And this energy is looking to evolve. And the reason why I say masochism is because um, Saturn is a planet that really wants to be kind of more in control and in charge. And whenever Saturn isn't being used in the best way, whenever that planet is not shining in its most natural light, the shadow expression of that is can be very oppressive, and it could be the sense of you have to atone. You know, that's very much tied up with Virgo too, very much so. But it also exists with Saturn, and the eighth house has um, a part of that archetype can struggle. One of the shadow sides of that archetype of the Scorpio in the eighth house has to do with control. And so this tendency to how do I control myself, and that being very self-deprecating. So her Libra stellium on her midheaven with Pluto, her north node, and the moon means that she cannot avoid um, being on display for everyone to see. So this is stressful and adds to a sense of protectiveness. Again, ruled by Venus, which is intercepted with her sun. So this is all of this energy, the stellium is happening right on her nodal axis with Pluto together on the IC-MC axis. So it's basically that stellium is bringing so many energies together in such a powerful way that it's one of the biggest players in her chart. The power that the stellium is congregating together, and really needs to be understood and dealt with. This stellium has deeply karmic ties that are intergenerational. um, I believe, and I say intergenerational because of it being on the IC-MC axis. So bringing up the energies from the IC because it's opposing that. So also being on the North Node means that these really are things that have been developed. These are energies that there are some familiarity with. So the North Node can be this cutting edge of new development, but when you see planets there, it means that um, there is a lot happening on the North Node that has already actually been developed, and those planets are hanging out there, um, representing the work that you've already done. And there's so much energy on the North Node, highlighted by being on the midheaven. It also indicates that because these planets have already been prior developed, there are true gifts here. Planets on the nodes are gifts. So even if they are deeply painful, and these gifts can be unlocked. So taking on so much ancestral karma in a way is a gift that Lonnie is providing, and it is a mark of a powerful soul, helping to clear so much pain from the planet, clearing the way for all of us. And so I just want to note, while we do take on karmas around us to process for the collective as well as our own, so much of the pain she's experiencing, um, I and her relationship to her environment and to others is something that I think so many of us can really appreciate and resonate with. And she is taking this on in such a deep and powerful way that it really is a lot of collective energy that she's tuning into, as well as her own. Obviously, her Pluto's there. This is an area of development for her as well, and being tied to her ancestry. So taking on so much ancestral karma is a gift that she's providing, It's the mark of a powerful soul helping to clear so much pain from the planet, clearing the way for all of us. A soul signing up for this level of work also means that they're able to advance themselves very quickly in the grander timeline. A soul might choose to take on this kind of work for that reason. And the fact of this being painful, yet present as gifts, is not as surprising when you view it from this lens. So these energies do not need to always present as painful, though, as life moves forward and things shift for Lonnie over time. And there is something that happens, especially with, gosh, like just so many retrograde planets in her chart. When you see gifts on the nodal axis, this is more so with the South Node. You'll see when you see planets on the South Node, they present as gifts that have to go through a bit of a relive dynamic before you can access the power in those gifts. You have to go back and kind of relearn some things, go over the same lessons, and catch back up to where you've worked up to, but in a way that makes it conscious for you. And normally you don't see that being the case so much with the North Node, but Lonnie has expressed so much struggle with the themes of that stellium and with Pluto being there. She's not new to this work, and so there is some development there. There are gifts for her, but she really is experiencing this in a painful way. And I do believe that while it's not easy, that her access to these energies as more in a way that will actually feel more like a gift and will be easier is totally accessible to her, um, with certain pieces having shifted. So this, which brings me to the solutions in the chart, or where the energy is being redirected. Basically, Taurus and Scorpio are ruling double houses. So that gives them incredible power that is much more available for her to wield. So again, with interceptions, while you have two signs in the chart that aren't ruling any houses, and so they're not really given agency, you, to balance that out, you do have two other signs opposite each other that are ruling double houses, which gives them a much stronger influence in the chart. And when you're looking for solutions to planets that are kind of locked up in these intercepted signs, you want to look at both the planets that are in the signs that are ruling double, because they have a lot more and energy behind them. Um, and you want to look at the signs that are ruling the planets that are intercepted, because that's a way of kind of trying to access those energies in a more roundabout way. So if the planets um, that are ruling, like for example, her Jupiter, or look at when this actually intercepted. So Saturn being in Leo, and that being an intercepted sign, if we want to say like, how do we get to that Saturn energy, we can look at the ruler of that Saturn. So we want to look at her sun in order to see where we can get at that a little bit more easily. We might say um, that energy is being redirected to the ruler of that planet. So back to her chart, and the solutions. Where if we're looking at planets that are in the houses that have double rulership, I want to start with Chiron. Um, so Chiron, you might notice, is that actually just at 1 degree of Taurus. So this is a very new phase of relationship, to the wound that Chiron is representing for her, being Chiron is like the wounded healer, and that being the the work that she's doing, to work through certain wounds. And with Chiron being the wounded healer, there's this theme of um, certain wounds that you carry, that when you're able to work through them, get on top of it in a way, develop tools for dealing with it that makes you more uniquely capable of understanding and being supportive to that wounding for others, hence the healer part of the wounded healer. Um, and so you can see that Chiron being at 1 degrees of Taurus means that this theme of being wounded around self-work or self-worth is very new. It's a very new dynamic for her, only 1 degrees into that sign. And being in the sign of Taurus, it's very much connected to worth. And in the 5th house, again, that wounding around that Leo energy tied up with her Venus, Libra, Taurus archetype. In every way that you can see that tie being reflected here in her chart. So it's tying into deep traumas and karmas, which I highlighted in prior slides, and connected to her sense of belonging, etc. This Chiron gives a much more direct access to the Venus energy, even if Chiron is a tender energy. Chiron and it gives more direct access to that Venus energy by being in the sign of Taurus. So Chiron is in a double sign, which again is Taurus, circling back to our main topic, yay. And it's ruled by Venus. So her Venus, again, is conjunct Sun, but in an intercepted sign. So it does connect back to the interceptions in a meaningful way. And overall, Chiron has an outsized impact on this chart and how it is felt. Its energy really dominates, being in a double sign, yet it is in an extremely new phase at 1% Taurus, so it's unfamiliar territory and harder to get a handle on or to get her bearings around. It also squares Mars retrograde in Cancer in the 8th house. So the Mars energy is very much turned inward, being retrograde, and in a way that may make the inner emotional landscape feel hostile at times, being in Cancer. So with emotions right on the surface, and especially in the 8th house, so bringing in a dynamic around emotions and control, the 8th house having that control aspect to it, this having that Mars Cancer in the 8th retrograde could mean that this is a soul who experiences her emotions in a very painful way, that they happen quick, fiery, but they also might burn hot and kind of quick and move on from it. But you also see that Mars being a fire sign, it's in the 8th house. Scorpio is connected to water, Cancer is connected to water, and so there really is a cooling effect as well. So there's these energies could very much be supportive of each other. They could be at odds with each other depending on how you see it aspected in the chart. In her case, being squared by Chiron, I would look at this without talking to her and make a guess that this energy is not an easy one for her. So Uranus, being also the ruler of her other intercepted sign, which is Aquarius. Uranus is the only ruler of an intercepted sign that isn't, quote, locked up in an intercepted sign. So because the Sun and Venus are in an intercepted sign and ruling her, ruling the planet that is in the intercepted well, anyway, her Sun and her Venus have rulership over the sign that we're trying to get access to, because it's also intercepted, which is Libra. And so trying to get access to that brings us to the Sun and to Venus. and you see that those planets aren't giving the agency that we're looking for. So when we look at Uranus and it's in a house that has actual agency, it's in a sign that has actual agency. It's in a sign that has double rulership. And okay, sorry, I was stumbling a minute ago. So the Sun and Venus are connected to the ruling that Saturn, which is intercepted in Leo. Okay, thank you. Just clearing that up. So, as opposed to Uranus, which is a planet that is really freed up in every way possible, honestly. So it's the only ruler of an intercepted sign that isn't locked up in an intercepted sign itself. And it is actually in a sign ruling double houses, the sign of Scorpio, which means that it hits both of the criteria for where we look in a chart for the more powerful and supportive planets that we use to help us resolve the energies that we have less access to, um, and that our energies that are the chart in this case is kind of funneling our energy toward. So Uranus, if you notice, has no aspects. It's literally the only planet without aspects in her chart. And therefore, it is not tied to or drawn into her karmic axis at all. When I highlighted Uranus for Lonnie, she was actually very surprised when I told her it was important. She said she felt that she had no relationship to it other than to express resentment for the lack of a real tribe or community. So this makes sense given how karmically tied together everything else is in her charts and how deeply that those karmic pieces are felt for her. And those all the other planets have deep ties to her history and ancestry, while Uranus is able to exist independently from those energies. Uranus is also ruled by Scorpio, so it's the very planet that holds all of her evolutionary potential, um, tied to the very prominent stellium on her midheaven. So this um, this stellium on her midheaven with the moon, North Node, and Pluto. Um, Given that Pluto is ruled by that Uranus, and that is a really positive helper for her in her evolutionary process. The ruler of Pluto having that importance for her. Um, so Uranus is a solution to so many things and has been hiding in plain sight, you could say. The solution that Uranus presents, both in and of itself and through its ties to the Libra stellium, is as follows. Simply put, hide less and let the others find you. So, craving the community that 11th house in Uranus represents, Uranus really is the linchpin to all of the dynamics expressed above. All of the interceptions redirect over and over again straight back to Uranus. These karmas being worked through, they can continue to be present and worked through in Lonnie's life, with plenty of opportunities to interact with the traumas in the quote outside world, while still having the blessed comfort of being a part of a community of like-minded people, which is what the 11th house would provide for her. This doesn't have to be sacrificed for her to do her work. And I want to say too, being in Scorpio, this community of like-minded people are going to be people who get it. They are going to be people who understand what it's like to be doing this karmic work, to be looking deeper. They're going to be people that are going to be able to speak her language, so to speak. So this having that in her life, it doesn't have to be sacrificed in order for her to do her karmic work. At what point she has achieved this in her life, I believe that's when her gifts will finally have been unlocked and be freed up to better help her, because of the influence that that Uranus has over that stellium on her midheaven. So I do feel that the key to unlocking those gifts really has a lot to do with that Uranus. So how does she access this like-minded community? Again, hide less and let the others find you. What I mean by that specifically is to say, Uranus in the 11th house is all about expressing what is most authentic to you in whatever way is most authentic, by placing no stock in whether or not those around her are receiving her and how, by being true to herself fully without molding herself to others' expectations or carving off parts of herself or making anything about her way of being different based on others around her who do not resonate with her and are not her tribe. She will be able to better project her true frequency when she does this, which will naturally attract like frequency. It will naturally attract people that resonate with her when she's when she is acting at her true resonance. So even if it takes a little time to do so and perseverance, situations will begin to coalesce around this new energy and reinforce and support it, and the others will find you. So remembering when talking about the process of a soul becoming fully conscious in their body, this is an incredibly important step. Whenever you, specifically, the Uranus represents, it's the place in the chart that most fully represents individuated consciousness, becoming fully individuated. So you cannot find that like-minded community if you aren't being who you are, because like attracts like. And if you're not gonna, people won't find you, they won't, you're not putting out that beam for them to follow if you're not beaming it. And so that's why it just takes a lot of self-care, a lot of self-love, um, while you are being brave to put yourself out there in that way, being brave to be yourself whenever you do interact and engage in the ways that are most authentic to you. Uranus, 11th house being about authenticity. And this is the big work that I believe will really unlock everything, everything for Lonnie. So that's the end of that slideshow for you. And I I could say so much more. um, I do want to keep this pared down to as much as I feel like can be integrated. And in the meantime, if anyone has any questions or thoughts they'd like to share, please do reach out. Feel free to comment and engage. I'm curious to get your insights. And thank you for your time. And I want to thank Linda too for providing the platform for these talks. The EA astrology group is just a really special place for people to connect and share information. And I'm grateful to be a part of it.